Why is Britain lashing out, and where do we go from here? By Ada Akpala. A supermarket burned to the ground. A building of the Citizens Advice Bureau, which provides important support and advisory services to the local community, also went up in flames. Local stores were vandalized, and police officers were wounded. These events occurred during recent anti-immigrant protests in various major cities across the UK. The unrest started following the abhorrent and brutal murders of 3 children in Southport by a teenager born in Cardiff to Rwandan parents. These recent incidents are reminiscent of the fiery scenes witnessed during the Black Lives Matter protests, particularly those that occurred in several US cities. During those demonstrations, protesters were said to be expressing their frustrations at feeling unheard and marginalized. Similarly, some British citizens currently feel that their own frustrations are constantly dismissed and have gone unacknowledged. These frustrations relate to various issues, including mass immigration, perceived lack of integration from incoming migrant groups, increased lawlessness and social disorder, and accusations of double standards and two-tier policing. There is also a sense among many that their values and national identity are ceaselessly demonized, while foreign nationalities, cultures, and ways of life are being lauded at the expense of their own. Any reasonable and politically unbiased person should be able to sympathize with these complaints. Several videos circulating online have documented the unequal treatment by law enforcement, for example. In some instances, counter-demonstrators were seen waving weapons in the presence of police, with little to no action taken. One particular video shows a police liaison officer apparently reasoning with another group of Muslim protesters, advising them that if any were in possession of weapons, they could hand them in at a local mosque. This approach has rightly raised serious questions about the motivations behind such lenient treatment and the overall integrity of policing practices. Identity politics has poisoned law enforcement practices in many ways. The hesitancy to confront or arrest individuals from minority groups, even when they're committing serious offenses like weapon possession, seems rooted in a misguided attempt at cultural sensitivity that ultimately undermines the very principle of equal justice under the law. It's as if the authorities are operating under different rules depending on the cultural backgrounds of those involved. During the BLM marches, we saw police officers taking a knee in solidarity with activists and engaging in conversations with campaigners in an effort to understand their perspectives and grievances. Yet that same level of compassion and eagerness to understand has been noticeably absent during the recent Patriot marches. Instead, these events have been met with what appears to be sheer disdain and antagonism from the authorities. One is right to question why certain groups seem to be afforded more latitude and understanding from leaders, while others receive harsher responses. It goes without saying that we must categorically condemn the violence and disorder in these recent disturbances, regardless of whether their cause is justifiable or understandable. Just as the chaos during some BLM marches and Palestinian protests was condemned, where police officers were sometimes assaulted with bottles and flares and historical monuments were defaced, we must also condemn the outright violence and disorder in these recent riots. Such disruptive and violent scenes, regardless of the underlying cause, primarily affect ordinary citizens who live and work in the local communities where these events take place. These individuals and businesses who have had no part in the decision-making processes of policymakers and national leaders often bear the brunt of the chaos and disruption. Britain is in a crisis. There are even whispers among some groups suggesting the possibility or even the necessity of civil war. It's often true that those who casually call for war have never truly been in war, nor have they experienced the true horrors and devastating consequences of armed conflict. The gravity of even considering such a drastic measure cannot be overstated. The challenges facing Britain are indeed significant. However, we cannot accept that the situation has deteriorated to a point beyond redemption. There are still numerous avenues for peaceful resolution and societal improvement that have yet to be fully explored or implemented. First and foremost, our political leaders must step up and take decisive action to address the root causes of societal discontent. Alongside this, there needs to be an end to perceived and actual preferential treatment for different demographic groups. We must also address the growing tendency to jump to impulsive conclusions when events occur. The rapid spread of misinformation, often fueled by social media, only serves to exacerbate tensions and cloud rational judgment. And perhaps most importantly, we need to reconnect with our shared human values. This involves actively working to bridge divides between different communities, fostering empathy, and finding common ground despite our differences. It's a task that requires participation from all members of society, not just those in positions of power. Britain has a long history of overcoming adversity through resilience, innovation, and cooperation. We should focus on these constructive approaches rather than entertain notions of conflict. This will require patience, commitment, and a willingness to engage in difficult conversations and make sometimes uncomfortable changes. But this approach is infinitely preferable to the unthinkable alternative of civil strife.